Lauren Southern is a Canadian commentator on political controversies. She often comments a lot on what happens in the United States. And it's perfectly legitimate for people to comment on what happens in countries other than their own. You know, if you look at what happens in other countries, you can see how maybe that's applicable to what's going on in your own community. Unfortunately, a lot of what Lauren Southern says about the United States, southern of where she is back in Canada, is ignorant at best. For example, she has this video bemoaning the removal of publicly supported, tax-funded Confederate monuments in the southern states. These were statues and monuments put up by the municipal government in these southern states. And now, likewise, and of course, tax money pays for the upkeep and maintenance of these monuments. And because people are very troubled by the legacy of Confederation and chattel slavery, many municipal governments are responding to complaints by taking down these monuments. And Lauren Southern bemoans this. She has this whole video bemoaning this, and she calls this the destruction of beauty and history. Hear her for herself.
So I've always had this weird, deep-rooted passion and obsession with architecture. It's something that totally mesmerizes me. And that feeling that I get when I go to cathedrals is something that extends beyond my favorite genre of architecture, but it goes out to most historical monuments and statues and buildings that I'm around. I always go up and I'll feel the stone or brick and think about the meaning of the object, the history behind it, all of the people who died to create it, and the people who dedicated their lives to designing it. It's awe-inspiring stuff. Early this morning, while it was dark, government workers dressed in all black, wearing masks and tactical vests, took down the New Orleans Battle of Liberty Place monument. They just cut it down. And not just that, they had police snipers positioned on rooftops to ensure the deed was done. I can hardly even watch the video of this because it infuriates me so much. There was a small protest, thank God, and bless those people who still care about their history and culture, but unfortunately there was little they could do. And not only that, this is just the beginning of a purging of the history that is being planned by the US government. The Jefferson Davis statue and Robert E. Lee statue and a few others are scheduled to be taken down next in this area. And I'm not talking about in a month or a year from now. No, I'm getting word from locals that this is likely going to happen tonight or tomorrow. And I don't even know what to say at this point. I'd like to think that I would go and I would chain myself to one of these buildings or statues if I could get there in time. But these criminals have freaking snipers ensuring the destruction of America's history and monuments. I don't care if these monuments are connected to the South. All history is filled with blood, death, hatred, and destruction, as well as beauty, hope, kindness, and compassion. There's hardly ever a story that is just one side good or bad entirely. And if we go about erasing the history that we hate, we will quickly find ourselves in a world isolated from our ancestors and from all history in general. Contact your local politicians, flood their phones and emails right now, show up at the statues and hold signs, spread the word. Just try not to forget our history and try to not let our governments force us to. Let our history and its beauties and failures endure throughout time.
You know, throughout Eastern Europe and even in Asia, in countries such as Mongolia, there were lots of statues of Vladimir Lenin put up. That's because the Soviet Empire conquered all these Eastern European countries, and when you thumb their noses at the people who the Soviets conquered, they erected these huge monuments to Lenin. And as you can imagine, these days, over the past 20 years, after the fall of the Soviet Empire, lots of people have decided, lots of municipalities and provinces have decided to take these Lenin statues down. And it's easy to see why. It's easy to see why. why should the tax-paying public continue to pay tax money to support monuments to people, to figures who have enslaved people, such as similar to yourself, people of the same race as you, who have enslaved your ancestors on some completely irrational basis? Just remember, communism is a type of slavery. Under communism, you are treated as a slave who supposedly rightfully belongs to the state and must be a slave who serves the state. That's why the Soviet Union had gulags. So are some clips of some Lenin statues either being taken down or rather cleverly modified. And at the end, a clip of angry Venezuelans taking down a statue of the socialist dictator Hugo Chavez.
Once renowned as one of the architects of an oppressive regime backed with military might, and so is the other one. Lenin was reimagined as Star Wars Darth Vader thanks to the work of an artist in Odessa, the fourth largest city in Ukraine. Cheeky Alexander Milov, a Ukrainian artist, designer and animator, even popped a Wi-Fi router under the Sith Lord's helmet in order to offer free net browsing to those who come to pay their respects to the dark side.
Among those, my favorite is the modification of that Lenin statue to look more like Darth Vader. I mean, let's face it, Darth Vader is a lot less evil than Lenin. Darth Vader killed lots of people, but those people were fictitious. They were imaginary. They were only in the imagination of George Lucas. But Lenin and Trotsky killed real people. They were mass murderers. Rudolph J. Rummel estimates that together, Lenin and Trotsky murdered an estimated 4 million people. So I entirely applaud people, the Mongolians and Eastern Europeans, for taking down those statues of Lenin. Do you really want to go around out in public and look in the public square? Do you want to see a public square that's publicly owned and taxpayer supported and see this big monument glamorizing someone who oppressed your ancestors or oppressed people who are like you for no good reason at all? Do you want to see that? I mean, when lots of people flee from Cuba and go to Miami, do you think that Cuban exiles want to go to the public square in Miami and see this big monument glamorizing and honoring Fidel Castro and Che Guevara? Do you think they want to see that? Do you think they want their tax money to pay for the maintenance and upkeep of those public monuments? No. And that's really the reason why people in the southern states are telling their municipal government that they don't want these taxpayer-supported Confederate monuments up. Or in Southern, I hope it occurred to you that, you know, there are black people who are tax-paying citizens. I know that you and Stephen Molyneux go around spreading these stereotypes about blacks and welfare and all that, but yes, there are black people who are tax-paying citizens. There are, you know, still descendants of slaves living in the United States who pay taxes, who have to pay for the upkeep of these monuments to these slaveholders, to people like Jefferson Davis and Robert E. Lee, who fought an entire war to preserve the institution of chattel slavery. And I know that there are revisionist historians from the Mises Institute who like to pretend that the Confederate States seceded not because of slavery at all, but because they were just mad that the northern states wanted to impose tariffs against farm equipment from Europe, which would make operating costs more expensive for the farmers in the South. And yeah, I don't like tariffs either. But you know what? That revisionist history is ridiculous. All you have to do is look at the history. You know that the Mississippi Declaration of Secession very explicitly names the preservation of chattel slavery as its main reason for wanting to secede from the Union. That's actually, you can read the declarations of secession of all these Confederate states on the internet, on Yale University's website, and the vast majority of these declarations they cite as their main reason for wanting to secede their idea that the northern states are hostile towards slavery, and they're worried that the northern states will gang up on them and try to vote against them and try to impose some federal ban on chattel slavery. That's why they seceded. Okay, the people don't want to go into the public square and see monuments glamorizing their oppressors. And you know very well this is real oppression. This is oppression. This is not fake oppression where someone said something politically incorrect and offended me. This is real oppression. Trying to impose slavery on people is what Lenin did, and he succeeded. He imposed slavery on people with guns and whips. That is what the leaders of the Confederation did. They imposed slavery on people with their guns and whips. And as I record this, or as I'm recording this right now, that's what Nicolas Maduro is trying in Venezuela. He's trying to enslave Venezuelans with his threats of violence. And there have been real casualties from this. It is oppression. Oppressors who try to glamorize themselves with big monuments. So people will look fondly on those monuments and assume that because this monument exists, these men were great heroes. When those monuments to Lenin came down, I sure didn't cry about it. Did you cry about it? Did you cry about it? Were you sad to see those angry Venezuelans take down that statue of Hugo Chavez? Did you wail that was the destruction of beauty and history? Well, if you don't mourn people, Eastern Europeans and Mongolians taking down these monuments to people who oppress them, then how is that any better? How is it different from people in the South taking down monuments to government officials who fought an entire war to preserve chattel slavery? Why do you object to one and not the other? I remember you ran for office on the Libertarian Party ticket. It makes me sad that you want taxpayers to continue to support on these monuments to political figures who fought entire wars to deny liberty to people. Now, since you ran for office on the Libertarian Party ticket, I recommend you do the libertarian thing. If you value these monuments so much, raise money so a private party can purchase these monuments and place them on private property, such as in a privately owned museum. That's how those monuments can be preserved for posterity. Stop asking people, taxpayers, pay taxes to maintain and upkeep monuments to oppression.